Email todaycb@rte.ie.
Go. Now, 70 barristers took part in a protest at the Criminal Courts of Justice. This was back in May to highlight a dispute with the government over public service pay cuts. And at that time, the threat of strike action was issued. Well, now the barristers who prosecute and defend in some of the most high-profile cases that come before the courts say they've had no resolution and they're now going to walk out. That's the plan on the 3rd of October. Sean Guerin is a senior counsel whose name will be familiar, I know, to many of you. He's also chair of the State Criminal Bar Association and he joins me in the studio now. Sean, you're very welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Claire.
So the dispute centres on the fact that fees payable to criminal barristers, they're at 2002 levels. Is that right?
Slightly below 2002 levels in nominal terms, and effectively that's a 40% plus pay cut over the last 20 years in real terms.
And this relates back to the FEMPI cuts.
It does. So what happened is that in between 2008 and 2011 we suffered 3 successive cuts, 2 of which applied across the public sector, and they're the standard FEMPI cuts, and an additional 10% pay cut which wasn't replicated elsewhere in the public service. And in addition, we had our link to public sector pay removed. And what that means at this stage, as I say, 20 years later, we're being paid below 2002 rates. And obviously, because of inflation, we continue to suffer a cut in real terms every year.
So the day that you made the announcement that this was imminent, I had, by coincidence, the Minister for Justice, Helen McEntee, here in the studio. And I said, this news has just come in that the barristers are planning to walk out on the 3rd of October. And she seemed to agree that you had a case. So where is the argument?
Well, in a sense, there isn't an argument, which is why it's perplexing that we've had to take this step of recommending to our members that they withdraw services on the 3rd of October. The background is that when pay cuts began to be reversed in between 2016 and 2020, we engaged in a process. It was always government policy that restoration of pay would be conditional on cooperation with reform and flexibility in the provision of public services, and we never had a difficulty with that. We engaged in that process. And the outcome of that process by July of 2018, so fully 5 years ago, Claire, was that there was unequivocal agreement by the Department of Justice and the DPP that we had provided cooperation with flexibilities and reform that were at least equivalent to those provided by other sectors.
So you say we kept our side of this bargain.
Not only do we say that, the Department of Justice has said that since July of 2018, and the DPP has said it. And indeed, the DPP wrote to the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform in 2021 to say that a political decision was required, and that's really the only obstacle in our way.
So have you sought a meeting with Minister Paschal Donohoe?
We have been trying to get our case across to Minister Donohoe and his predecessor in that particular office, Minister McGrath. We met with Minister McGrath a little over a year ago. We have never had an explanation for why pay hasn't been restored, and it's our position that in fact there's no good reason why it hasn't happened.
But that's where the problem lies. I mean, that's what you've established, isn't it? That Paschal Donohoe is not willing to listen to you. Do you say that?
Well, I know we have the support of the Minister for Justice. I know we have the support of the Director of Public Prosecutions because the work that we do is important. It's an important public service. The political decision to restore pay is effectively a decision for the government to make, and it's for the government to explain, I suppose, in a sense, why that hasn't happened.
Maybe they're looking at it and going, it won't be politically popular to say we're going to restore the pay of barristers.
Well, I want to make it very clear that we're not looking for a pay increase. We never have done. All we're looking for is pay restoration, equivalent to what happened in other parts of the public service. And in asking for that, we make it very clear that we have complied with government policy of providing real reforms and improvements. And those are real and meaningful, Claire. They relate to things like the implementation of the Victims' Rights Directives, new measures to improve the experience of vulnerable witnesses and other persons in court, the implementation of electronic briefing, which results in real savings, both financially and in administrative terms for the Office of the DPP. And we have continued, even since 2018, to cooperate with reforms such as the new procedures for pre-trial hearing of legal issues, which represents a significant efficiency for the Gardaí and for members of the public serving on
Sean,
juries.
can we just look at the numbers here? Because I think people will be surprised by this, because at the last protest, Barrister Darren Lawler your colleague, said barristers practicing in criminal cases in the district court are paid €25.20 for a remand hearing, €50.40 for a plea in mitigation at a sentence hearing, and €67.50 for a full trial hearing. Are those figures correct?
Those figures are slightly different to what the dispute that is currently going on between ourselves and the government relate to. The current dispute relates to restoration of fees paid directly to barristers for work that they do in serious criminal cases. And by that I mean cases prosecuted on indictment in the Circuit Criminal Court, the Central Criminal Court and the Special Criminal Court. Those fees that my colleague Darren Lawler was talking about, they're in a different category. They're not paid directly by the state, and that's an arrangement between barristers and solicitors.
So what are we talking about here? Can you give us numbers that people would understand?
Well, the brief fee, so to speak, for a standard criminal case prosecuted on indictment in the Circuit Court is just over €1,100. That has to include all of the preparatory work that's done, which nowadays can involve extensive disclosure of materials. There's no significant criminal case, certainly involving offences against the person nowadays, where there isn't pages, hundreds of pages often, and sometimes thousands of pages of disclosure from electronic devices that needs to be reviewed and assessed. And all of that preparatory work and of course all of the experience that one has to bring in terms of knowing the law and experience of cases, all of that preparatory work has to be done for that fee.
So you're saying it's €1,100 before tax for potentially weeks of work. That be right?
Well, certainly days of work. Yeah, certainly days of work.
And what should it be?
Well, it's not our place as the Bar Council to ask for any specific rate of pay, and we haven't ever done that. What we've asked, and it's a very simple ask, is that the process of pay restoration that has applied across the public sector and to others providing public services should apply equally to us. We find ourselves going into court. If you're prosecuting a case, the state solicitor sitting across from you has had pay restoration. The court officials have had pay restoration. The judges have had pay restoration. The Gardaí have had pay restoration. The prison officers have had pay restoration. And so as we look around the courtroom, apart from the criminal defence solicitors, everyone else in the room has had pay restoration. We haven't. And there's no good reason why that should be the case.
I'm sure you'd agree that people might have an impression that all barristers are very highly paid. And do you think that there's an inverted snobbery perhaps at play here? Like there might be a view among some people that people who are in your profession are overpaid.
Well, the evidence doesn't support that, and the real difficulty for us is that what we find is that within 6 years of starting practice as a barrister in the area of criminal law, 2/3 of our members will give up. They'll leave either the profession entirely or go and practice in other areas of law. And they're a loss not just to our profession, but they're a loss to the public, because those are, talented, well-educated people, capable over the course of years of acquiring the experience and the skills necessary to handle these difficult cases. And they're being lost to the system, and they're being lost to the public service.
But there's very good living to be made by barristers in other areas of law, like civil cases, for example.
There is.
And why then do some criminal barristers continue to work in this area if it is so difficult as you outline?
Well, I mean, there are all sorts of reasons. Everyone makes their own personal decision. The work is really meaningful and valuable work, and I think for a lot of us that's an important feature of our daily lives and how we go about our work. But it's important that we maintain in the system a supply of people who, although now they're relatively junior and are doing maybe more simple, more straightforward cases, will over the course of 10, 15 years acquire the experience and the skills necessary to handle the really difficult cases.
But do you? Sorry to interrupt you, but do you see that there is potentially now a brain drain happening with this situation?
There is. Well, it's not potential. It is happening, Claire. As I say, we know that we lose 2/3 of our members who practice criminal law within 6 years of their starting. And we also know, because we've seen as recently as this year, serious cases, in fact, I think in both cases, serious cases of offences against the person, where the Director of Public Prosecutions had difficulty finding a senior counsel who was willing to take the case and who obviously had the experience and the skills to do that. And that's a real loss to the system, to the public who avail of the system. And I think it's something which in the long run will damage public confidence in the administration of criminal justice.
So walking out on the 3rd of October, did you select that date carefully because it's in advance of the budget on the 10th?
Well, I suppose it's the first full day of the legal year, which resumes in October every year. And we wanted to make that point at this stage, at the start of the legal year. We did also want to make the point in advance of the budget because, as I say, we have been waiting for this process to be resolved and for these issues to be addressed for fully 5 years now. So it's time that this issue was addressed.
Thank you very much for coming in. That's Sean Guerin, Senior Counsel and Chair of the State Criminal Bar Association. Back after this.
Text 51551 today with Claire Byrne on RTE Radio 1.